Paco Garcia. I am the organizer of this panel in GLS Magazine. And the panel that I wanted to organize today about game production. Has any of you ever thought about actually designing and producing a game, making it a physical thing? You know, in the time that I've had my website and I've been talking with designers and publishers and producers, one thing that has really amazed me is how there is a lot more to it than it looks, a great deal more. So I thought it would be a great idea to have a panel with three different people, because having with three same people would be strange and kind of impossible, that have very, very different companies, both in terms of the size of the companies and actually the size of the productions that they do. So I'm going to pass it on to them to introduce themselves and introduce the company, so you know exactly who they are and what they're doing. That will give you an idea as to understand why I wanted them in this panel. So I'm going to start to the far over there. Give us your elevator pitch of who you are and what your company is.
Hi, my name's David Brayshaw. I am one part of Backspindle Games. Please apologise for my voice. I've been demoing obviously for a couple of days. And I had something else on before that. We're a small company. We have published Guards based on the books of Sir Terry Pratchett initially in 2011. There's a whole story behind that. We then went on, we published a game called Kodinka, which was a little strategy game, which actually in the strategy awards here was the top best new abstract game 2 years ago, before the public vote, when it ended up third, which was kind of nice. But we actually self-published that, but that's another story. It's actually being made into an app right now. And then this year we published Luchador Mexican Wrestling Dice, which I'm wearing, so really that's where we are with stuff. And I suppose finally, we may have done something right with this because we are a small company, but on the back of that, Terry Pratchett has given us a license for a new Discworld game, which hasn't been released yet.
Agnieszka.
Hello everyone, I'm Agnieszka Kopera. I'm with NSK Games. We are a publishing house opening house. Okay, it's a big word. We're a publishing company, first one in the Romanian market. And we have Andrei Novak in our group, who is also designing the games, and he's the founder of the company. We started back in 2011. We managed to start with a very complicated game, Warriors and Traders, and because of that, the project was pretty complex. We managed to make many mistakes and learn out of it. That's why we were able to later on create Exodus Proxima Centauri, and we managed to also make many mistakes, and then we learned. And I will tell you, what did we learn? What were the problems actually involving this project? And now I think the most known games of ours is Praetor, which was released just a few weeks back. And of course we are now planning many more games because we put our systems in place. So now we are making very few mistakes. We cannot not make mistakes as long as we are not company as big as you will hear. Yeah.
My name is Justin Zoran. I'm president of WizKids Games. We're based in New Jersey. We design and publish HeroClix's collectible miniatures game, Mage Knight Couriers, Star Trek Fleet Captains, and most recently Dice Masters. We also have a line of collectible miniatures for Pathfinder miniatures as well as Dungeons and Dragons. And we have just announced the fact that we will be doing Dungeons and Dragons Attack Wing, which is a dog-fighting dragon game based on the FFG Flight Path engine. We also make a lot of mistakes and have learned from learned from each one of them. And if I could count the amount of mistakes we've made, it would be embarrassing. But at the end of the day, the important thing is that we've learned and grown from it.
One of the things that the big and the small have in common is that you guys, both of you, have worked with licenses of basically products that were very well known and much loved by the fans, and that is always taking quite a risk, because if you produce something, whether it's good or bad, but you produce something that the fans don't like, you're going to be left hanging in the air to dry. That's very difficult. Dave, from the point of view of a very small, the first thing that you ever did as a game publisher, how did you approach that?
Well, initially we had a game made of guards cards in 1991, way back. So it didn't really go to any fans other than us, people who read the books. Some 10 years later or so, we then were talking to the right people. We're obviously talking to Terry Pratchett's agent for a while. We're talking to different companies in America and people who maybe play tested it. But critically to the process, we had to have the game played by a substantial amount of key people in the Discworld, if you know what I mean. People who would be close to Terry Pratchett, who would go to all the conventions, who would be organisers, doers. So they play tested it a number of occasions, and they fed back a lot of, points of view. But again, we're back to the same point of any game design, is that at that point you can't put everything in. You've got to evaluate the good things, the bad things, and most of all, in doing that, the game balance. So it was, you've game flavour at the end of all these things that everybody wants, and then game balance with flavour at the other end, and trying to stretch that out in the middle somewhere so it comes together in a nice game that everybody likes. So we had to do that before it was published and before we got the license.
Justin, how does that compare with your experience with other franchises?
So it's actually very interesting in that we experience the exact same thing. And one of the things that we try to do is, one, I hire people that are fans of the IPs and the properties that we generally do. I've actually turned away games or turned away licenses where I didn't have someone that was what I call a champion inside the building. Mm-hmm. So we start there. Two, we're very plugged into the communities. So we, when I have fans working for me, they are also plugged into the fan communities, and they can funnel back information into the company. Three, we work very closely with the licensors. And the licensors we work with, Marvel and DC, obviously have some very strong opinions on things. I think the challenge is the fan communities want certain things, the licensors want certain things, and I'll give you an example on Marvel or even the big comic properties. The fans, of course, love Iron Man, Thor, the Avengers, and the licensors want us to promote those big properties. The fans, while they love all those properties and all those characters, they want to see the Squirrel Girl and the Dude, and we have to kind of run a very fine balance between supporting the licenses tier 1 property, as well as speaking to the fandom and the enthusiasts, and weaving that together is sometimes challenging. Sometimes we do well, sometimes not so well. But the good thing is that specifically on our types of games, we get to try again and try again and again, and some might say too much. But yeah, it's very, very, very difficult part of the job, and getting the balance just right is the secret sauce.
And in terms of once you get that, how much does balance influence the production of the game itself, in terms of what are you going to put in the box? So it's a little different with us because we run a collectible game. So I have the liberty of being able to span the Squirrel Girl to the Iron Man, and then I mix them all up and I put them in the box. And obviously one of my objectives is every time someone opens up a Marvel booster pack, they see Marvel characters that they love and recognize. I want to see an Iron Man in there. I want to see a Spider-Man in there. But at the same time, I also want to kind of feed the enthusiasm of the hardcore enthusiasts. So it's just a balance, and I have the luxury of being able to mix it up in different proportions so that we can get just what we'd like to see, just what the licensor would like to see, and just what the fan would like to see. So I have a unique ability to do that. Other games, it's a little bit more challenging. I feel bad for some of the other companies that have to make that choice. But fortunately, we don't have. You have to. Did you have to do?
Oh yes. I mean, we had a Discworld is immense. The flavour of Discworld is immense. I mean, micro art at the time, we were doing the little miniatures, and if you give me a board game and it was Discworld and there's Discworld miniatures in it, I'd be like, it's heaven forbid the M word. It was a bit like Monopoly. I want to be the car. I want to be this. I want to be Granny Weatherwax. I want to be, So we looked at these things, and we looked at costs, and again, being a small company, cost is very important. And subsequently, what we decided to do was go for very good artwork in the box, good artwork in the guild cards and that. But primarily, we did something which was innovative, which no one else, I don't think, has done. In that we got a commissioned Discworld artist, Stephen Player. We did shop around. Some of them, they're a lot harder to pay than others. Now there's lots of people have done Discworld art, but one who has been recognised as such and used by projects directly by Terry Pratchett is really nice to have as your brand. So we went to Stephen and said, would you consider doing 90 illustrations of Discworld characters from the books, having no images of text because we couldn't, copyright and all the rest of it. We had to give him physical descriptions from books and quotes and what we felt of every character, and then we did quotes from every book for a quote for each character. So we felt that was the best thing for flavour, because when you play a game like that, which is quite multi-mechanical, if you like, lots of things to do, you can do about 7 things in your turn. In between that, you can read the quotes about these characters, and you can see their faces, and and you can relate, and fans can relate to that. So thankfully, that was the most important thing for us, and it worked out really well, because each and every single drawing had to go past Terry Pratchett, and out of them all, he disliked one. Funnily enough, that was the same one that we both said, we don't like this one. And we'd given Stephen an extra 6 or 8 characters to do, so he very quickly just turned around one of them, brought it back out, spot on, and it worked. But for us, that was the most important thing, that we could be affordable, and yet would be, for a Discworld fan, I've got whoever it is that they really like, I've got Granny Weatherwax, or whatever the character is. That was where we were with that, so we had to make a hard decision, but it was, still expensive, but to go figurines, miniatures, better components would have been a more expensive route for less flavour. You could have got generic artwork over the top of it, and it would have been, I think, a lesser game.
Alexa, how does that compare with your experience? Because you guys, still yet haven't had a licensed brand game. How does that compare with your experience of actually producing your games? Are there any elements in common?
So at the beginning we thought it's amazing that actually we can make games by ourselves, and now I'm thinking that it's less and less amazing. Because it's like every designer, we and the publishing company, we are gamers at heart. So what is happening, that you have this amazing idea and you are trying to make this game, so you put a humongous amount of components. This is exactly what happened with Exodus, by the way. You made a ginormous civilization building game, and then after you make the game perfectly working, you test it, you have to actually sit on the other side of the chair and say, okay, so now we want to publish it. So what do we need to cut? And it's extremely difficult, because it's your baby. You cannot cut things. You cannot just take them away, because you work so hard. So from that perspective, sometimes we think that maybe one day we would also get games from a third-party designers, because we will be less involved. It will be more actually business decision than a decision and a struggle between, okay, so what can we do? But we learned this in a hard way with Exodus Proxima Centauri, with the first edition, and then we actually discovered that, we actually are able to learn really fast and read a lot, especially if you see the second revised edition. I think we kind of found the way to balance it. But of course, we would one day consider it. So far we have Andre, we have me, we design games, we like it, we can publish it, it's even better.
Justin, I'm very interested in one thing. Because of the insanely huge production scale that you guys go for, how much time do you have to spend researching, choosing, and eventually going for whatever material it is, physical material it is that you guys go for?
So I'm fortunate that we have a platform. We're a platform strategy company, and what I mean by that is that we have game engines that we map a lot of different properties onto. We generally don't like to do a one-off game, so we put a lot of work and a lot of research up front to materials, components, production runs, how big, how soon do we have to start, and that creates a template for kind of the subsequent iterations of the game. The process is long. Specifically, the process is long with plastics because of the overseas component. We generally have to start production runs, production planning 13 months in advance. On top of that, 6 months before that, we actually have to tell the licensor what we're going to do. So now we're talking about this 18-month planning pipeline, and there's all kinds of decisions on how much plastic to buy, what quality of plastic to buy, what the mixture of the plastic is. Oh, and by the way, certain figures have a different mixture than other figures, believe it or not. Like when you have a thin ankle, you want to make sure that that's a stiff plastic, and it's very, very challenging problems. But in the end, it's a very front-loaded process. Once you do it once, it becomes much easier.
And so you went to going from Warriors and Traders that had no minis to actually Exodus, Proxima Centauri that had minis. How was the process for you of including minis in the game for the first time and doing plastic for the first time?
So it was extremely challenging because we, of course, were trying to find the best offer for that size of the game, taking consideration that we didn't have the financial power like the big companies do. And the thing is that the game is really humongous with the amount of cardboard, plastic and wood it has, plus cards. So what we did, we were trying to get offers from Europe because we thought, okay, this is going to be the best option. And they were just simply not, price-wise, absolutely not acceptable because the game would have to sell for a really humongous amount, like a third edition of Twilight Imperium. So, and with our name not really being known well, we couldn't risk that. So we actually had to go with the production of plastic to China. And yeah, this is the thing, that first you are trying, and the problem is you cannot be there physically, check things. So it can be challenging, especially also the language, the cultural barrier. But honestly, it's like Justin said, you have to start it really a long time ahead. And if you really want to keep your deadline, and you think, okay, I need 6 months, then add actually 30 or 50% more, and then start doing it. Yeah.
Do you see yourself at some point going the minis way, or is it something that you actually avoid? Because so far the games that you've created you don't have any minis.
That's true.
Is that going to change in the future for you? How do you feel about that?
We might have to talk. At this point, I really don't know. I mean, we've a new Discworld game, Clacks, hopefully to come at some stage, which may. Mm-hmm. Actually, I don't want to give too much away here. It may actually involve a mini type idea. Mm-hmm. So yes, is the answer.
And are you considering that whatever it is idea you have in mind of upscaling the production of your game? Why? Is it because it has become easier? Is it because it's important for the game itself? Or is it because games with minis sell more?
Well, there's a couple of sort of advantages with this game we're looking at. One is that it's not language dependent. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple strategy game, so we can have it translated into different languages. And two, it's quite a small number of components really compared to something like Guards. So it gives you the scope price-wise to look at doing a really nice little mini or two or whatever that people can use. So I suppose it's a bit like a foot in the water of minis. I'm not doing a whole set of 15, 20 figurines. I'm going to just do one or maybe two, but that one or two for people is the bit that makes them think, yeah, that's really cool. So I suppose I haven't done this, but we've obviously looked at things like the whole 3D printing. We're looking at different ideas around that, how we could try our models out. So yeah, ideally we'd love to do it. It would be really cool, but it's going to be a steep learning process again.
Before we open the floor to questions, I'd like to do a couple of things, and is to get from the three of you two absolute no-nos. Don't do that when you're approaching games production, and the biggest lesson that you've learned while doing the production for your games. So 5 seconds to think about that one, because I can see the thinking faces.
What was the first one again?
Right, the first one. Start with the first one. No-nos of game productions.
Yeah.
Things that you really must never, ever do. Don't do that.
Okay.
2 things.
In game production, as in just actually producing the product. Mm-hmm. do not rush the rules.
Okay.
The rules are, for me, all the other bits, with all the work that you rightly said there, Justin, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when someone opens a new box, if you haven't got the rules, and I nearly said to Christian, Fantasy Flight, I nearly said to him about, you know, a step-by-step, a ready reckoner, something nowadays, because it's the 21st century. People want to be able to go, all right, that's it. They don't want to go to page 25, go to page whatever, or to actually come back and say, well, this technically doesn't make sense with this. Mm-hmm. So for me, don't rush the rules. Get them right. Don't sacrifice the step-by-step, the guide, the process of delivery of rules for any other reason other than just getting it right. That would be the first thing.
Okay, and the second?
I'll think about whether answer.
Okay. So I would also say the no-go. I would not actually... The first thing what came to my mind is not about the gameplay itself, but as a production, because I don't know how many of you actually is dreaming about producing game, making the game, but if you ever decide to produce the game by yourself, it's extremely important to choose a manufacturer very wisely. It means that you literally need to be able, as a small company or a person who wants to have a very small run of games, that you are able to actually communicate personally with the person, because with the person who is responsible for preparing the offer for you. Why do I say about this? Because this is the biggest lesson learned we had from Exodus Proxima Centauri from the first edition. The first edition was produced in China, and even though we receive amazing samples, we receive amazing proof of our game, it actually looked differently when they got later on to us. So, because we were not there, we literally couldn't see what they put in the box, even though we got those samples. And now with the Exodus Revised Edition, this was the best thing possible. We got the manufacturing company who literally gave us the price per every single piece of the game. But it actually took us more than 6 months to convince the companies that we need this breakdown. Not all the manufacturing companies will agree to do that. We needed this breakdown because we wanted to make the game better, but we didn't want to increase the price. So we moved it to Poland. We were almost every day for 6 months meeting with the guys, discussing, checking the types. And this allowed us actually to not make any mistakes in terms of the quality, how we managed to do it. It's really important to actually know what you're really, really paying for, and later on you can actually improve what really you need to put in the game. Because, for example, I will give the example, you sometimes can replace something with the wooden cubes instead of actually making additional punch board. And you will not know it as long as you don't know what is actually the biggest price value in the production you are getting, the price of the production. Because that's why you need the amazing good communication, and to be able to check how the actually whole process is going. Especially if you don't have this experience, because now we will work on the third game with the same company, and honestly we can just go there once to say, okay, the color proof, we will check it, and we know they are good. So especially this, I would say, it's very important.
How about for you, sir?
So actually I'll reiterate a couple of points, but my biggest no-no is don't change your mind after you've tooled your product. And very, very challenging because you start tooling about 7 months before you release a product. So all of a sudden you have this, oh no, what's going to happen? It gets very expensive. My second no-no is don't move forward on a project till you know exactly how much your tooling is going to cost you. We made this great game, Star Trek Fleet Captains, and I will tell you, we were moving fast. We said go, and we got the bill afterward, and we're like, oh no. Like, it was, when I say oh no, I had much more vulgar words came out of my mouth. And we sat there and we said, what are we going to do? And we were fortunate enough to be very creative problem solvers. So we said, we can redeploy this tooling into Star Trek Tactics. And then fortunately, we can redeploy it into Star Trek Attack Wing. So we kind of worked our way out of this corner to something very positive. But had we not had that opportunity, Oh no.
And what's been the biggest lesson?
Plastics are not easy. So do your research. Don't think making a miniature is easy. It isn't. I can't tell you how important it is for us to have not just one person in China, but 2, 3, 4 people in China full-time. My staff, I don't, it's not that I don't trust my manufacturing partners, but I trust but verify is a famous quote. We trust but verify because the samples you get are not the same thing that you'll get out of the production run. And having someone there with the sample saying that this doesn't match, start all over is very important.
Yeah, my second point leans on that a little bit, and it's not a nationality thing. Don't trust the Chinese. It's shop around and get the best deal, because we found when it came to shipping, we were working with a Chinese manufacturer who were very good, and we got proofs over and we did all what you're talking about, and we tied down the components bit by bit, piece by piece. But there's things like samples coming over, there's shipping to Essen, there's bits and pieces here, bits and pieces there. And what we found out was they added a lot at times into shipping consignments, thinking that, we didn't check shipping, and I will be honest, at the start we didn't. And when we found out how much they were adding on to shipping, at times, it would shock you. A small box this size was coming maybe from China, and it was costing us £75.
Oh.
And we got 12 games of 2 boxes of guards shipped over this time around, 3 years later, for £140, and they're this size. So it's very much, and we learned, go to a local shipping company, go to different shipping agents, ask them to check and double check what they're, and if they come in, $100, $200, $400 cheaper for, they'll say, well, you handle it, please, because the Chinese manufacturers see it as an easy way to beef up their product by adding it on to people's shipping.
Okay, so we've gone through the possible pitfalls and how to approach that side of things. Now, you've had your game. Logistics, what happens then? Because the three of you have, again, very different requirements in the sense of logistics, because although you two may print similar amounts of games, but you have more games to look into, to ship, to distribute, and, well, in your case, I can't even imagine the numbers. It might be insane. So what are the logistic considerations that you have to always keep in mind, regardless of the size of the production that you have at hand?
Shipping. So shipping's complex. So on any particular HeroClix release, we bring over about 9 containers, and that means it's pretty easy you get a schedule that says, hey, you're going to start shipping on this date. What that means is that your product is shipping over 2 months. That's a challenging logistics problem because it comes into a port on the west coast of the country. It goes through customs, it goes through inspections, then it goes to warehouses, and it's moving all around the country at various different rates. And you never know when one of those containers is going to be held up by a customs agent. It happens more often than you think. Last year, for example, the US government increased its audits on toy product because of the number of counterfeit products that were coming into the country. Disney was a big advocate and was working with the customs agent. We've been making Marvel product for 12 years, and so we've been doing this. We have authorization letters and everything, but all of a sudden 4 or 5 containers get held. And the effect that had on us was, I won't say catastrophic, but it had this crippling effect that the last container gets held up. And of course, the last container has the most important stuff by chance that I needed at the very beginning. And we're so good about planning, making sure that last container actually doesn't have anything that's mission critical, but in this case, it did. And then all of a sudden the release is delayed. And then we have such an aggressive release schedule that you move a release out 20 days, all of a sudden the next release is now compressed. And so you have to have this cascading shipment. So everyone's like, oh, you always miss your release dates. I'm like, well, you should be able to control that. I'm like, well, and of course it's always our fault, but so many things are out of our control.
Yeah.
In America last year, we had one of the worst winters we've ever had. So you compound, 9 containers over the course of the year being stopped with one of the most, the worst winters that we've ever had, where we had warehouses closed for days at a time. And you can see how this cascades into things. We got very good at what we call firefighting and calling our distribution partners and saying, can you work on the weekend? Can you work overnight? And fortunately, they were able to do that for us. But it is much more complex and much less sexy than everyone thinks it is.
And so how about for you? What are the logistic considerations that you always, regardless of the amount of your production, have to keep in mind?
So this is like Justin says, that from China you actually need to really plan long ahead, and you need to give yourself this kind of unknown time limit that something may or may not happen. And what we did, we actually calculated the whole price of production of the game together with the shipment, so with this delay time plus the price for the shipment, and we actually got to the point that we were able to get a altogether price, not just for the production wise, better in Europe than in China, for our amount of the copies we produce, of course. Because we talk about 9 containers, there's...
Not yet.
Not yet, soon, of course. So at the end of the day we had to make a compromise, because it seems that it's so much cheaper, but it's actually not. So this we managed, because we actually didn't have to wait for the whole shipment, we have them at home. What we actually are struggling now with is with the shipment of single games to US from Europe. This is actually a big horror, but we are finding solutions, so this is good. We actually now have partners in US, so no more shipping games before, for example, so what we did pre-orders for Praetor. And we were so happy because we have literally 20 minutes by car, so we picked up the game straight from the production lines for our pre-orders. We sent it before the pre-order was ended. So we're like, yes, they're gonna get them first. And you can imagine that it's like 3 weeks later and the guys in US, they still don't have the game. And we're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So yes, we actually found a way now, but again, if this problem would not happen, we probably would never know that there is a way we can improve it. So, but this is something we work on.
Okay. How about for you?
Well, we're smaller, so our approach is different. We've, since the beginning, we linked up with a Stadium in the UK. They actually had belief in this before it was even published, so that was quite nice. So they were able to work at the shipping with us. So we had someone who was experienced in the industry to manage that sort of thing. And then in the last year or so, we linked up with Game Salute in the US. So again, purely for shipping, and purely for shipping costs and delivery and dispatch to the customer, to the gamer. Because I mean, there's Game Salute have done the Kickstarter for us for Luchador, and they're sending stuff to Australia for something like $15 or $20. If we try to send the same game from the UK here, it's like £30 to £40. So working with people in the industry who are experts has helped us. But again, on top of that, pre-orders. If they place a pre-order for whatever it is amount of games, well, we can give them more off the price, and they can cover the shipping, and we sort of work along those lines. So we sort of let them do it, but in the same way, we still are copying into the emails, keep a check it's happening, tick the boxes, make sure it's happening, make sure people are paid. So we sort of use other people who are in the industry because we're quite small, and that sort of gives you a wee bit of a feel-safe, that you have someone there to back you up, because they need their stuff as well. And it's a bit like yourself waiting on containers. If the big guy needs his stuff, well, there's a fair chance the wee guy's going to get it at the same time, and that's what we do.
Yeah, we actually do the same thing too. We actually rely on our partners as well. We are a bigger marketplace footprint. We have 12 of us in the office, and so we rely on Stadium as well. We rely on Alliance and Diamond as well for their logistics capabilities. So I make it sound like it's all us. our partners are a very big part of our ability to get product around the world in a timely fashion.
You know, the one thing that really strikes me when I talk to designers and publishers of board games, that it really doesn't matter what the size of the company is. Everyone seems to work incredibly hard. And I think extremely hard. Is it really that tough of an industry to work?
I think it's extremely hard. I think the benefit we have is that we kind of love what we're doing. And so, you know, it sucks to have, I literally am on the phone with the factories in China, like this morning, saying what's going on, you know, are the dice coming? And those of you who might understand that, are the dice coming? That literally was my conversation this morning. And it sucks to have to work on a Saturday or a Sunday or, you know, at 12 hours offset. Yeah, correct. And that's rather routine. But the fact is, I grew up playing games. I don't play a lot of games now, but I know the love and I know the irrational passion of spending hard-earned money on things that you don't need. And I know the joy that brings people. And so it's actually fairly easy at that point then.
So we have a little bit different perception of that, because we actually start the company because of passion. And basically Andre made his first game. I don't know if I should say it, but I will. He made it because he wanted to win a bet. So he was challenged. He was challenged that he didn't like the game, and some friend of his said, "Oh, you don't like it? Make your own." I said, "Okay," and he made his own. And this is how it started. And of course, I believe that in the small companies, especially like ours, we had many moments when we realized that we don't have another life. Now this, making the games, producing them, this is our life. Sometimes I'm finding myself that, honestly, I'm talking to my mom and I'm thinking, oh, okay, so I need to send those files for approval, and the guys will have to calculate the die cuts. Okay, so where do I have to do it? And then I'm suddenly figuring out, oh, my mom asked me a question. Sure. Really, it became a routine. We don't. Honestly, Andre and I, we are actually non-stop. Even our holidays are on the gaming events. This is our holiday. And maybe one day, I don't know, maybe in 20 years, we'll get, tired and say, okay, it's enough, but I doubt it. So far we just really love what we do. And at the beginning it was very naive, because when you say people, oh, we love gaming and we do it from passion, it's like, okay, yeah, so how long do you exist, right? So it sounds naive, but really it is, and this is the drive. And basically this, that we are meeting people in person, it also differentiates us as a company, because honestly we keep in touch with so many people personally who just say, oh, I played this game of yours and this happened, so what do you do in that situation? And we literally personally reply to every single email. So we have this really amazing kind of bond with people who play, who visit us, and this actually gives us power. One email which says, oh, I bought your game, I love it, is like, yay! And yeah, this is how we actually do it.
How for you was it like? How hard is it working in this industry?
Me?
Yeah.
Typical day. I work in a college. I save souls. I have people coming to me and saying, the cat ate the budget, I'm upset. And I have other people saying, I want to commit suicide, and I got to deal with all that stuff in between. That's my day job. I also run a karate association. And then after that there's family and there's board games. My thing in board games, although we're not very big, but you always want that, I want to produce something that's a big hit. You think you could do something because you've so much passion about it. I've got a Rubik's Cube, that sort of thing. Is that most of that work for me comes some 9 to 1 o'clock in the morning, where I'm on networking, I'm on marketing, I'm on this, I'm on that, and Leonard would probably be the same in graphic design. It's funny you said about what inspires you to drive to do something, and I think this is very important. It's like Rory Story Cubes. It's like a lot of people I've met in the gaming industry who take something and really make a success of it. when Guards first was the concept, we went to a local government development group and we took it to a chap who looked at our game, and he basically poo-pooed it and put us down and said all these horrible things. And we were devastated. This was the guy in Northern Ireland, such a big place. And you don't get anything in Northern Ireland unless you work extremely hard. And we didn't know what we were blown away by this negativity, and we basically put the game on the back burner for about 6 or something years or 8 years. And by fluke, I happened to chat to a guy in the Green Board Games company. It was about insurance or something. I got a link to this guy, and he said, David, the board game industry, he was just talking generally, is now worth billions compared to when you had your idea. That sounds like a game somebody might like. So I thought, okay. So I rang back up the agency who your man had worked for 6 years before, and I said, look, we had this game and the guy was such and such. After a bit of a conversation with a few people, they said, oh, him, he never did anything. He only approved one toy in 5 years, and he backed it 50% and left the company to join them. And I thought, bastard, I'm going to try and do something with this game. And that was the point when eventually I got in contact with Steve Aim, and they put us in contact with Fantasy Flight and Christian and Z-Man and different companies, all to try and do the prototype. But I mean, that in terms of hard work, that was only just to get a company on board to actually say, we could work with you for a product. And believe me, that is the easy part of it now when I look back. The hard part was the fact that we had to basically self-publish Guards by ourselves. And Zev's here. I've no fallouts with Zev, but Zev was publishing 30 games. Zev was moving house, and Zev was selling his company. He really didn't have a lot of time for us, so there was an awful lot of time spent going over stuff with the Chinese, shipping, play test further, da. So, you know, extremely hard work. But as you rightly said, Justin, it's a love of it. And when you sit down, or in Guards case, when you have a group of people who play Guards, and they get up and they go, and they come back to the convention an hour later and go, we bought a book. You know, they've gone out and bought a Discworld book. You think, wow, because before that I didn't even know what Discworld was. When you see that passion from people, or like last week we had someone who had wrote and said, it feels like we're really in the Discworld playing a part, playing a character. That, as you said, gives you that buzz of, yes.
I'd like to open the floor for questions. I'm sure you should have some in your mind. So we have 5 minutes so for a couple of questions. Sir.
It seems that although you've all got different types of games and different sized companies, there all seems to be this sort of potential bottleneck, which is we need to produce in China because of the cost. Have you thought about, you know, companies working together to try and bring production closer to home so that you reduce the shipping costs, so it kind of equates out, you've got more control to turn over things quicker?
But this actually happens, you know, in terms of shipping, and yeah, this actually happens. But you know, there are so many companies that I think it's very difficult actually to find this kind of relationship. And then when you actually are on this kind of events, when you meet person in person, then you say, oh, you know, we are shipping this. Oh, we want to ship that as well. So let's talk about it. But it's very difficult to know somebody else's schedule and try to actually work out. But this is a very good point, because this, of course, it would help, right? It will actually speed up things as well.
How realistic would it be to be able to do that for a company your size, for your production your size?
So we actually in-license. So like, for example, Paizo was considering making plastic, and you know, after talking to people, they realized it's difficult. So instead of partnering with us, we just got a license from them. But I think the reality of companies partnering together is difficult in a manufacturing sense because of priorities. Who gets on press first? What if there's a problem? Does that affect the other person? In terms of moving production closer to home, absolutely look at it. I mentioned that the pipeline to work with China is about 9 months. You're actually paying for tooling 7, 8, 9 months before your product comes out. You're paying portions of your production costs up front. And so there's cash out often 6 months before that product hits your warehouse. And so you have to have the financial wherewithal to do it. So that actually makes the calculation of bringing production over to Mexico, for example, reasonable. It's a reasonable option, even though it's more expensive in Mexico. It might be better because of the time value of money. The problem is you've invested so much time in our situation to pre-paint, to teach people how to paint miniatures and teach a factory how to paint a miniature, that to do that all over again in Mexico or a new, on a new workforce, it's years of work and years of mistakes and years of learning. So there's this switching cost that makes it very difficult.
Next question, please.
How ridiculously expensive is a license? And is it like a big lump sum upfront payment, or is it a percentage of the receipts you get back in? How horrible is it?
Dave.
No judgment.
I'm just going to make a quick look between ourselves here, and I'm thinking World War II minefield. I think that the range between licenses from one person giving a license to another, to branded products, to ones that are linked to Marvel or movies or X-Men or whatever, is vast. I mean, we work with obviously Terry Pratchett. They've signed deals with movies. They've signed a thing for making The Watch, a 13-part series. The recent license we got for the new game, Clax, we have a lot of stuff written in there which is obviously lifted from, like the TV one that said, well, they've got all this now, so you can't do this. So it's a minefield. And in terms of royalties and finance, I have no idea. It's vast, I would only imagine.
You see, we didn't mention, but Exodus also have a license of the Silent Death ships. Mm-hmm. So it's not that we actually didn't license something as well. But I think it's actually really minor comparing to the licensing, the Terry Pratchett, or
And yes, there can be a lot of money up front.
Yeah, it's absolutely different range we are talking here.
How is it like for you?
So there's a range, obviously, from the smallest licenses to some of the larger licenses. For example, Marvel, they're the hottest thing around in America right now, big movies, and so there's a cost to that. We sign the licenses. There's a royalty associated with those licenses. That would be great if that's all that was associated with it. But what they ask you to do in general, and it ranges from different licensees, they ask you to give you projections and prepay all the royalties up front.
Right.
And so if you sell 1 unit or if you sell 10 million units, you've paid their royalty. They've gotten their pound of flesh. So you have an incentive to get product to market quick, fast, and make sure it's good. So it is particularly challenging. It's just one of the other challenges. I'm glad you asked the question because no one actually understands how complicated. Oh, why don't you just go get Star Wars, or why don't you go get Buffy, or why don't you get Walking Dead? It's not that easy. Yeah. It's not that easy, and it's expensive.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we have another seminar coming in just a few minutes. So thank you so much for being with me, and thank you guys for coming.
Thank you very much.